Hello, my friends. I'm Rick, and this is your seat at the table. And this is kind of a dreary weekend here in Iowa. We had some thunderstorms over the night, and the whole day is supposed to be off and on rain. It's kind of gloomy out outside. Great day to be doing some videos and stuff. So this is actually going to be the second attempt at doing this second edition AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide. I did this here. I did a video a couple weeks ago, and for whatever reason the video didn't save properly on my laptop. Like I said, my laptop is getting to be having some quirks, and geez, I'm just praying that it holds together. There's even a slight, I don't know if we call it a wave or bump or something going on the left side over here in the laptop itself. It may not be something normal, and it may not be. Then I also take into account that I live in a house full of goddamn cats, and everybody sheds. There's bloody cat hair everywhere. This would be a cat. If you have cat allergies, this would be a very toxic place, I think. Anyway, so second edition came out in 89, 90, I think. I gotta remember. Like I said, I had this all done 2 weeks ago, and then I had to redo it, and it just annoys the hell out of me. 1989. And so some of the things that I took out of it is, of course, this is like every edition. It is an attempt to rewrite in some ways, to edit in other ways, to bring in, introduce new concepts and things, and sometimes completely change a set of rules or the entire rule system. Generally speaking, this is not that way, but even the creators mentioned that they'd learned a lot of stuff from the first edition books, and the first edition had been around for about 8 years, 7, 8 years at this point, and they wanted to bring it a little forward. And goes on talking about, let's assume if you are reading this, or you are or plan to be a dungeon master, by now you should be familiar with the rules, etc. You should already know those things, but blah blah blah. And it also makes comments about, if you're going to be a player, you should not read these books. And I'm sorry, but you can't. If you're going to be a gamer in general, that's just kind of not thinking through what they're saying too well. Because once again, most players, you didn't just decide to be a game master, a dungeon master, or a referee or whatever. You either found yourself in a position because nobody else wanted to do it, or because you started as a player and said, I would like to do this. I would like to do that. So to tell players that they really shouldn't read these things or invest in them is stupid. That's just my opinion. That's a dumb thing to do. And it's a dumb thing to say, specifically from the creator's perspective. No offense, that's honestly what I think about that. No, you should be encouraging everybody to read these things. And I understand this is what leads us to those things, those uncomfortable, pain in the ass types of that are basically rules lawyers. I get it, but it's just kind of silly in my mind. So years and years ago, I highlighted a couple portions of this, because every now and then I like to point out to players, old and new, when certain questions or debates come up. Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master Guide give you what you're expected to know, but doesn't mean the game begins and ends there. Your game will go in directions you have not yet explored, and your players will try things others think strange. Sometimes these strange things work, sometimes they won't. Just accept this, be ready for it, and enjoy it. Take the time to have fun with the AD&D rules. Add, create, expand, extrapolate. Don't just let the game sit there, and don't become a rules lawyer worrying about each piddly little detail. If you can't figure out the answer, make it up. And whatever you do, don't fall in the trap of believing these rules are complete. They are not. You cannot sit back and let the rule book do everything for you. Take time and effort to become not just a good DM, but a brilliant one. Right? So, at conventions and letters and over the phone, I'm often asked for the instant. You can tell you how old this was. They'll mention a text or emails, right? Which is pretty much how they talk about everything nowadays. Instant answer to fine points of game rules. More often than not, I come back with a question: what you feel is right? What do you feel is right? And the people asking the questions discover not only can they create an answer, but their answer is as good as anyone else's. The rules are only guidelines. From the beginning of the first Dungeon Master's Guide, Gary Gygax stressed that each of us, working from a common base, would make the AD&D game grow in a variety of different directions. That holds true to every game system that's out there. Every game system that you own or you participate in, that you play, that you enjoy, that you like, the rules are guidelines. The lore is a guideline. It's to give you something to work from. They're foundation stones. They're building blocks. From that, wonderful, incredible, horrible, and pain in the ass things will occur and grow. And that's what makes everybody's enjoyment so much richer, in my opinion. I'm just pointing that out. And most of you already know that. I'm speaking to the ones who may not know that, or I'm just speaking what everybody has in their head. The rules are there for a reason, but they're not the end all to beat all. Right? And it's important to keep that in mind, because sometimes there are players, there are people, and there are dungeon masters, game masters, or judges, and whatever you want to call yourself, that have that fall into that same trap. That same trap about thinking that this is the only way something should be done. You know, it's just the idea being is this is the accepted way, and if we all agree that this should be the accepted way, unless we find that it's not convenient for what we want to do, and we're willing to adjust it accordingly, and we get that home brew, as it's so popular now, but the house rules that have been for many decades and probably should still be that way anyway. So we go into, like word about organization, the fine art of being a DM, giving players what they want, choosing a character creation method. One of the things that second edition introduced was a whole slew of different ways to roll up stats. And so there's like 6 different methods for rolling up stats and changing opportunities. And we also start to see the beginning of the concern from the player base and from DMs alike of min-maxing, of having player characters create characters that are basically superheroes, that they max out everything to become the best at everything and achieve everything that they, some part of the game is failure. Part of the game is being unable to succeed. So some of the best parts of the play is beating the odds, of finding some creative, inventive way to overcome whatever the obstacle is that's before the character and the group. And so it already starts to address by second edition things like super characters, how we can identify 2 powerful characters, dealing with them, and it also talks about hopeless characters, dealing with hopeless characters, dealing with dissatisfied players, wishes and ability scores, things that do come up a lot, and it still does here. 30 years later, we still see a lot of this pop up. As we talk about hopeless characters, it was this stuff here when it started cropping up that got me thinking, why are hopeless characters hopeless? And generally it's because when they create the character in the first place, the stat blocks are so poor, the rolls are so bad that the character is not likely to survive long. The other one would be people wanting to try to do something that's so not appropriate for a given class or character. And that causes issues as well, and usually is found out the hard way. There's something that I tell new players too, and there's reasons why game companies in general do play testing and have people play test stuff. And the more play testing they can afford to do, the better off the game will be, because it gives a chance to work through the basic misunderstandings and flow so we can cover majority of the things, but it doesn't cover everything. And yet at the same time, there's usually a good idea why the rules say this is how you should approach something. It's because people have tried doing it in other ways and they didn't do well. Either it wasn't entertaining, or it was a complete abject failure, or more importantly, it may have so skewed the system that it becomes problematic. So if a character becomes super powerful, they become the min-max king or queen of the battlefield. The downside to that is it gets boring. After a while, you say, where's the challenge? You know, this was one of the things that led to the upper level, epic level material and ever increasingly more potent foes. But at some point, when your characters can go on the field and face off against gods, then they themselves, by definition, have fallen into that category of being in kind of that kind of playing field. But at that point, where's the challenge? Where's the interest in it? So unless you're just all about points and bells and whistles and mowing down your opponents and collecting loot, and even that gets boring after a while. That's one of the. I don't know about you. I mean, I'm just talking me. But when it comes to video games, that's one of those things that I'm not a big fan of about video games over time. Most video games have a bad habit of becoming a grind and repetitive. And at some point, you've gone to every corner of the sandbox. You've tried every variation of pick up the shovel, and after the 100th time or the 1,000th time, we look for something different. This is also one of the things that help drive the industry because that's part of the base. We get tired of this. The game system becomes stale or becomes unwieldy or just becomes boring, and we put it up on the shelf and collect dust and move on to another system, another game, another genre, something different. Just my opinion, right? So, anyhow, and the big introduction in here. I mean, there's most of the stuff that's in here is just in an improved version of the first edition set of rules. There's some extra stuff that came in here, the general information and things that you would expect to find the Dungeon Master's Guide. There's nothing really earth-shattering about it. I know that I use this quite. My friends and I use this quite a bit until I use the term third edition loosely because everybody considers 3.5 third edition. Even though 3.5 is a revised version of 3.0, I was never quite 100% sure. To me, 3.5 is third edition. Anyway, because third edition, when they moved to the D20 system, that's when things that became our dominant system, and that's my preferred Dungeons and Dragons go to. But in truth, I unless I get somebody that comes up and says, "Hey, can we play Dungeons and Dragons?" I don't. This isn't my choice. First choice. I would rather play in a BattleTech or Star Wars because I'm a sci-fi guy, and if I really want to do a sword and sorcery, I want to pick up Rollmaster because it's more of a challenge, and or I want to use MERP. I want to use Middle Earth role playing as the backstop, and then I might use the D&D rules for simplicity because once again, it's easier to have players who already understand a lot more people understand the basics of Dungeons and Dragons than want to learn a whole new system. And you have to either want to or not want to, so it's a matter of how you want to look at it. And anyway, I got a lot of good use out of it. And of course, when we start talking about crunch and about expansion of what some people consider splat books, this was the issue or the edition where this begins. Because once again, if you've already seen one of my videos, I already did the one on the Thieves' Handbook, and there's like a slew of books in that series. And that's just the beginning for second edition, and it set the bar for third edition and fifth edition. Fourth edition kind of petered out in part because fourth edition was so radically different. Once again, it was a group of people at the game company who thought that the card market, like Magic the Gathering, was the thing, and everybody was wanting that, and so they tried to in my opinion, tweak the AD&D rules to work kind of like a card game, using some cards as tools. And there's nothing wrong with that if it expedites the play, if it makes things a little simpler. And I played and ran in 4th edition for about 2 years, but I personally never bought any of the books. As an associate of mine, he bought like 10 of the damn things, and he ran one game, and then next thing he just wanted to play, and so he loaned me all of his books, and then when we parted ways, I gave them back to him because they were his, and there you go. And went back to my 3.5 until 5th edition. I was kind of shoehorned into getting it when I was trying to run I was running games on D&D and Beyond, which I won't do D&D Beyond today now because I don't like what's going on with what's going on over there. It's not on my playlist. So I'm not worth my time. My time is extremely valuable, what little of it I get. So anyway, all right, and basically your things on how to run encounters, how to handle treasure, how to deal with characters, and how to deal with players a little bit. There's a whole section on saving throws and things like this, critical hits. This is the things that I always liked, because I liked, one of the reasons I was attracted to Rollmaster is because of the expanded critical hit charts, because they're colorful and they really drive things home. And one of the things I don't like about Dungeons and Dragons in general, I surely don't like about the fifth edition material, is how they've neutered it. The lethality has its place in a game, and if your character has no risk, if there's no serious risk for your character having some kind of demise or being incapacitated, then it becomes boring too quick. It's just they've made it so it's almost the whole damn game's. The fifth edition is basically, if you want to use that cliche term, Mary Sue. Well, fifth edition Dungeons and Dragons is Mary Sue, the whole damn thing, and not impressed by it. I grant you that it was a return, because obviously they learned some valuable lessons in 4th edition since it didn't do as hot, and they went back to the drawing board. More importantly, went back to 3.5 and said, okay, what made this one so strong? What made 2nd edition so strong? What can we take from these and pull forward to 5th edition and rebuild the fan base, only to try to destroy it all over again with this 1D&D BS stuff. And don't kid yourself if you think that they said that they're not going through with that, because I honestly believe that the 5th edition may be the last actual serious brick and mortar pen and paper series system that is put out by Wizards of the Coast for Dungeons and Dragons, because I think their corporate masters are hell-bent on turning it into a video game on a grand scale and just finding 100 more ways to suck money out of your pockets. That's the one thing I always like about this stuff here. No offense, I own this. This is mine. I bought the goddamn thing, and I got 25 other books to go with it, and I play it anytime I want. Anybody who wants to sit down at my table, who wants to play it, and I want to pull the system out, and they want to whine about it, I'll just say, I'm sorry, this is what I have, this is what we're using. If you don't like it, we can play something else, or you can go home. But I own this. I don't want a digital version on an internet server somewhere that is going to keep leeching money out of my pocket because somebody at the corporate decides that the entire series of virtual books that I own is now defunct. And they could actually turn them off on you because you're using a virtual tabletop. They control what gets to be used on that and not you. And I have a huge problem with that. Just, once again, my personal opinion. So, your typical Dungeons Master guys, and then we get into a whole section in here on hirelings, NPCs, how to deal with, NPCs, the assassin, the spy, and the sage, right? And this is the sort of stuff that's information that as a GM, you want to know. I always thought that they could have done a little better about giving tips and advice on how to be a dungeon master and how to do well. And there's a few books out there that attempt to do that, but many of them just kind of skirt it. It's just kind of a learning curve, and you learn the best you can, and you do the best you can, and your players accept it, or somebody else ends up becoming the new DM. Just my personal opinion. Anyway, that's 2nd edition's DMG. Going on, my friends, this is Rick, and hey, if you like the channel, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, tell your buddies, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, tell anybody else that's in the gaming industry or gaming fandom that says, hey, this is a channel worth checking out, right? Till next time, I hope you guys have yourself